Let's say you've got a student in your class who is having a hard time behaving or has some behavioral challenges and is experiencing some difficulties in your classroom. You need to report on it and you need to create a record about that. That is a very high care case, which means it must be done very carefully. Fortunately, AI can provide some fantastic assistance for that process, and I'm going to show you how. Let's start with our prompt template, from which everything else is going to follow. This is how we start getting AI to assist us with the process of documenting student behavior. So what do we have first? We're assigning a role to the AI, a diagnostician specializing in student behavior, and who is going to assist us in writing objective behavior documentation for internal school records. So this has to be done very carefully. It's going in the student's record. Now, that's boilerplate, and there's some things that you need to fill in now. For example, what is the grade? What is the setting, or where are these behaviors occurring that you're reporting on? What's the time period you're reporting on? And then any kind of specific observed behaviors. We call them observed facts, but what are you actually seeing the student do? All right, good, bad, or indifferent. Now, you modify that, and then here's the rest of the template, which is boilerplate. You want the AI to write a 3 to 5 sentence behavioral note that meets these criteria. Neutral, factual language, describes observable behavior only, notes the context and your responses to the student. Avoid assumptions about intent, motivation, and certainly avoid any kind of diagnostics. Then we're going to add something to this, which we will come back and use in a moment. We want the AI to label this behavioral note with student observation and the date range for the observed behaviors. And then one thing I like to put in many cases is to simply say, AI, if you need some clarification, you need some more information, ask me questions. All right, so that's the template, but I must clarify something here. When we are describing behaviors, we want to avoid any kind of interpretation, judgment, or diagnostic information, like the student was being defiant. That's not a behavior. That's a description or an interpretation. The actual objective behavior might instead be something like, the student said, "I'm not doing this," and pushed the worksheet away. That is what you actually observed, and that's the kind of information we want to put in the prompt. So, with that in mind, let me show you an example, and then I will show you what AI does with it. So we've got our boilerplate at the top, diagnostician, assisting, and so forth. Then I'm putting in the specific information for this student. Grade 2, general education classroom. Time frame is last week, and then I'm listing what I actually observed from the student. And I've got a number of items there. Finally, I finish up with the rest of the boilerplate about writing the behavioral note and the criteria and the specifics and so forth, and label it with student observation, date. Okay, so I take that now and I drop it over in ChatGPT, and what it gives me is a nice synopsis of the student's behavior based on the information that I provided during that time. Great, right? But because this has to be done so carefully and objectively, we're going to follow up with something essential here. What I'm going to ask the AI to do is to review the response that it just created with some specific parameters. All right. So what I'm going to ask the AI to do is review the draft for subjectivity, interpretations, or any kind of judgmental language. And if it finds it, ask me for objective descriptions instead. Then revise it using only objective descriptive language and list any modifications it made. If it doesn't find any, simply indicate that the draft seems free from subjective language. Well, you might or might not have seen it, but when I dropped in my sample, I had some interpretive language in there. I noted that the student was disruptive, which is a label, not an objective description. So, can the AI find it? Well, let's see. So I ask for the review, and it says, aha, I did find some subjective or judgment-based language. Disruptive student behavior towards classmates. And what it's asking me to do instead is specify what was actually observed. And it gives me some ideas to help me understand what kind of language I might put in or descriptions I might put in this place. And interestingly, worked appropriately. Now, we all say, I know what appropriate behavior is. Everybody knows it, but that is not objective language, and people have different definitions of what that means. So, specify what was actually observed. And some examples here. So it's going to try to produce a draft for me with objective language, but it's asking me for those clarifications. Now, I am going to say disruptive, and here's what I actually observed. Appropriately, here is what I actually observed, and then the AI is going to revise it for me and come up with what's actually an objective, non-subjective description of the student behavior during that time period here. Great stuff. And it's going to list what changes it made. So that's good. Now, why are we putting the date range in there? Here's why. If you are observing and monitoring a student over time, you're going to be creating some kind of a running record. You're going to end up with a lot of these, potentially, right? On a daily basis or on a weekly basis or whatever period, you're going to end up with a bunch. So as you do this, keep adding it to the running record. And what you'll have is a series of notes by date over time. We can then take that document and send it back to the AI to interpret changes over time. Is it getting better? Is really what we want to know. Or does something else need to happen? So here is the final prompt in this process right here. Follow-up 1, we did that, and follow-up 2, here we go. Review the student's running record, identify trends indicating change, and areas that do not show any growth and may need further support. Now, I might add to this, for areas that are not showing progress, recommend some strategies for my consideration. So that might be a nice piece to add to this. But really what I want to know at this point is the behavior getting better? Not my emotional reaction, not my interpretation, but based on the objective information, are we seeing positive growth in this student's behavior? So there you go. Getting AI to assist with one of the most sensitive things that we have to do as educators, reporting on student behavior. I hope you found this useful. Take care.